History is not a series of accidents. It is a series of handovers. From the king to the state, from the state to the corporation, and now, from the corporation to the algorithm. We have lived through the illusion of the sovereign individual for 70 years. That era is now being terminated. In 2026, we are witnessing the final phase of a project that began a century ago. It is the transition from a world of citizens to a world of nodes. Most people believe the global crisis is about inflation, war, or energy. These are merely the tools of demolition. The goal is the clearance of the old system to make way for the sovereign collapse. In this investigation, How Systems Work will peel back the final layer of the global grid. We are not just talking about your money or your devices anymore. We are talking about the ownership of your biological and digital essence. We are deconstructing the pillars of this new era. This is a roadmap for the next decade. If you are watching this, you are part of the few who still have the capacity to see the architecture. But seeing it is not enough. You must understand how to navigate the ruins. Welcome to the final deconstruction. Before a new system can be built, the old one must be rendered unusable. The system is currently engineering a total trust vacuum. We analyze the systemic destruction of institutional credibility, from the media to the scientific community, and finally to the currency itself. The architects know that a fearful population will beg for order. But the order they are preparing is not for your benefit. It is a zero-knowledge architecture, a system where you know nothing about how power works, but power knows everything about how you work. We examine the first pillar, engineered chaos. To control a person, you must first control their ability to survive independently. For centuries, physical cash was a tool of autonomy. It was anonymous, decentralized, and required no permission to exchange. But in the eyes of the architects, cash is a hole in their surveillance grid. We are now analyzing the controlled demolition of the legacy financial system. The inflation you see is not a mistake. It is a feature. By debasing the currency, the system is performing a global wealth reset. It is shrinking the middle class until their only option for survival is to accept the new terms of the grid. We deconstruct the liquidity trap. As traditional banks become more restrictive, the system pushes the population toward central bank digital currencies. This is not just digital money. It is programmable obedience. Internal white papers from the Bank for International Settlements describe a future where your money has an expiry date, where you are forced to spend it to stimulate the economy, or it simply vanishes. Under the new architecture, every transaction is a data point in your compliance profile. If your carbon footprint exceeds the monthly quota, or if you purchase goods from unvetted sources, the system simply denies the transaction. The billionaire sanctions were a test run. Now, that same technology is being scaled down to the individual level. You don't need to be an enemy of the state to be financially depersoned. You just need to be a statistical outlier. The debt trap is no longer about owing money. It is about owing your existence to a system that can switch off your ability to eat with a single algorithmic update. The next pillar of the sovereign collapse is the elimination of the unverified human. In the old world, you were who you said you were. In the new world, you are only who the database says you are. In 2026, the transition from privacy to transparency is nearly complete. We are analyzing the Universal Digital Identity Framework. This is the convergence of your medical records, your financial history, and your biometric signature into a single, immutable ledger. The architects realized that as long as identity was tied to a physical document, it could be faked, lost, or burned. To achieve total control, the identity must be tied to the biological self. We explore the Internet of Bodies, your iris, your gait, and even your heartbeat are now your primary access keys. But there is a dark side to this convenience. If your body is your password, you can never change it. If the system deplatforms your biology, you are locked out of physical reality itself. We deconstruct the human token model. Under this architecture, a human being is treated as an asset class. Your value to the system is calculated in real time based on your health data, your educational output, and your social compliance. So-called zero-knowledge proofs are marketed as a way to protect your privacy. In reality, these protocols ensure that while the public cannot see your data, the central gatekeeper has a 360-degree view of your entire existence. The system is no longer asking for your ID. It is claiming ownership of your biological data as a public good. The digital identity is not a tool to help you navigate the world. It is the fence that determines if you are allowed to enter it. The most effective management system is one where the boundaries are built into the information flow itself. We have moved beyond simple content moderation. We have entered the era of architectural perception management. We are now analyzing the centralization of digital intelligence. The Internet is no longer a decentralized library. It is an output of large-scale cognitive models. These systems serve as the primary interface between the user and global data. We deconstruct the guidance protocols. These are systemic parameters that define the standardized information environment. When a query is made, the result is calibrated to maintain systemic stability. We look at information weighting, how a system can prioritize specific narratives by adjusting the visibility score within the AI's response loop. If an idea is deprioritized by the model, it effectively ceases to exist for the majority of the digital population. This is automated knowledge curation, operating at a global scale. The system also utilizes advanced sentiment analysis. The grid monitors engagement patterns to understand public trends. By analyzing interaction rhythms and consumption habits, the architects can forecast societal shifts before they manifest. This is data-driven social calibration. If the data suggests a trend toward decentralization or institutional skepticism, the information flow is automatically adjusted. It introduces neutralizing content and diversionary topics. We examine how behavioral analytics firms describe the human interface as a predictable variable. The final stage is the optimization of the historical record. With generative technologies, the system can now maintain a dynamic archive. We are witnessing the birth of adaptive history. If records from the past do not align with current institutional frameworks, the system can generate a vast quantity of corroborative data to support the new consensus. In this environment, historical accuracy is a dynamic value managed by centralized compute power. Without access to offline, physical archives, the individual loses the ability to verify the past independently. Next, we analyze the fusion of resource access and behavioral data. This is another pillar of the sovereign collapse, the transition from utility access to resource licensing. By 2026, the global energy infrastructure has been fully integrated into the central management cloud. We examine the dynamic consumption model. Your access to electricity and water is no longer a guaranteed service. It is a flexible allowance based on your systemic contribution profile. We look at the implementation of smart resource contracts. If a district's carbon footprint exceeds a set threshold, the grid automatically implements load shedding for non-essential users. But essential is defined by the architects. We see the rise of priority zones, data centers, and administrative hubs that have 100% uptime, while residential areas face predictive blackouts. Energy is becoming a programmable asset. we deconstruct the personal carbon allowance systems being tested in pilot cities. Your digital wallet is now linked to your smart meter. If you purchase high-impact goods, your home's energy price increases in real time. This is the economic thermal wall. It is a system designed to regulate human behavior through the most basic of needs: heat, light, and mobility. We analyze the global grid protocoler plan to ensure that every joule of energy used on Earth is tracked, taxed, and authorized. The sovereign individual of the past could live off-grid. The node of the future finds that there is no grid to leave. The grid has become the environment itself. Access to resources is the final tool of the architects to ensure that the sovereign collapse is not just digital, but physical and absolute. Thank you for watching. Follow us to continue deconstructing the systems that shape our world. To move from a free society to a managed one, you must control the most fundamental element of survival: energy. This is how the sovereign collapse happens: through resource allocation. By integrating the power grid into a social compliance framework. Welcome to Chapter 5, the Programmable Grid. By 2026, global energy infrastructure has fundamentally transformed. We're reshifting from the universal service model, where energy was a commodity sold to anyone who could pay, to a conditional access model. We're going to deconstruct the Smart Grid 2.0 protocol. This is a centralized, cloud-based system that monitors every single joule of electricity in real time. Through AI-driven smart meters, the architects can now perform micro-targeted load shedding. This isn't a citywide blackout. It's the power to disconnect a specific household based on its data profile. Technical white papers on grid balancing reveal that in times of resource scarcity, energy is prioritized for high-value infrastructure. Think data centers, government hubs, and compliance zones. Meanwhile, low-priority nodes face predictive power rationing. The system is now merging your financial wallet with your utility meter. This is the carbon credit synthesis. Pilot programs for personal resource allowances are underway. Under this system, every person is assigned a dynamic consumption quota. Every time you turn on an appliance, drive your electric car, or use high-bandwidth data, you're spending your quota. When your quota runs out, the price of energy doesn't just go up, it fluctuates based on your systemic alignment score. If your behavioral data shows high compliance with institutional goals, you keep your energy efficiency credits. But if you're flagged as a statistical outlier, your access to the grid gets throttled. This is the thermal wall, a systemic barrier regulating human behavior, not through law, but through the physical environment itself. The architects are also engineering the concentration of resources. We're seeing managed urbanization projects, where rural energy grids are being optimized, meaning decommissioned in favor of hyper-efficient smart cities. The goal is to create a dependency loop. By making it technically and financially impossible to live off-grid, the system ensures every human must remain a connected node just to survive. The Energy Security Acts of 2025 restrict independent power generation, like unauthorized solar panels or private generators, under the guise of grid stability and environmental safety. This is the ultimate enclosure. In the old world, sovereignty meant you could walk away from the system and provide for yourself. In this new world, the system is the only source of light, heat, and motion. To be disconnected is to be physically erased from modern life. The sovereign collapse is final when you can no longer even ignite a spark without the system's digital permission. The fourth pillar of the sovereign collapse is the systematic dissolution of the traditional labor market. For centuries, a person's independence was rooted in their skills, their ability to trade labor for capital. But, in the era of general AI, the concept of work is being archived. Welcome to Chapter 6, the erosion of cognitive labor. By 2026, we are witnessing the great decoupling. Economic productivity is soaring, while human employment is stagnating. Let's deconstruct the efficiency paradox. As AI models achieve general competence, the cost of cognitive labor drops to near zero. The architects have realized they no longer need a large middle class to run the industrial machine. They need a small, elite group of system maintainers and a vast, managed population of information consumers. Internal memos from global consultancies describe the redundant workforce, the billions of people whose labor is no longer required for the system to function. To prevent social friction, the architects are introducing the Universal Basic Income, or UBI, but not as you know it. This is the digital dividend protocol. It isn't a welfare check. It's a behavioral stipend. To receive your dividend, you must maintain a verified node status. This means your biometric data must be current, your smart meter connected, and your systemic participation score within the approved range. This is the golden cage strategy. By providing for people's basic needs, the system removes the incentive for rebellion. But in doing so, it removes the capacity for independence. You are no longer an employee or an entrepreneur. You are a beneficiary of the grid. Without the ability to build private capital independently, the sovereign individual ceases to exist. Ambition is replaced by compliance optimization. People no longer compete to innovate. They compete to satisfy the algorithm's requirements for the next tier of dividend credits. This is the feudalism of the 21st century. In the old feudalism, the lord owned the land. In this new version, the architects own the compute and the energy. You are allowed to live on their digital land as long as you follow the protocol. The sovereign collapse is complete when the population stops asking for opportunity and starts asking for access. The transition from citizen to node is finalized when your survival becomes a monthly subscription provided by the architects. The shift to a post-labor economy isn't just about losing jobs. It's about the systemic removal of economic agency. The architects are replacing wealth with permissions. For the first time in modern history, we are seeing the end of the saving class. In the old world, capital was a store of value that could grow, allowing an individual to eventually buy their freedom from the labor market. In the 2026 architecture, capital is being replaced by flowing credits. Let's deconstruct the velocity of compliance. New, digital tokens are designed to circulate, not to be hoarded. Through negative interest protocols and usage decay, the system ensures that no one can accumulate enough independent power to challenge the grid. If you don't spend your credits within the systemic cycle, they lose their value. This creates a state of permanent economic fragility. You're kept in a loop of constant consumption governed by the real-time pricing of the architects. We're seeing a transition from private property to user licensing. You no longer own your home, your car, or your tools. You pay for the right of use, a right that can be revoked by the central server in a heartbeat. To manage a population without labor, the system uses incentive engineering. Your access level to high-speed transport, premium healthcare, and uncensored information is tied to systemic quests. This is the participation economy. To earn extra social dividends, people are encouraged to perform community metrics, which often means monitoring and reporting on the systemic stability of their local environment. We're seeing peer-to-peer compliance models, where the grid rewards those who enforce the protocol on others. This creates a self-regulating prison where the guards are the prisoners themselves, incentivized by a few extra credits of energy or data. This brings us to the digital ceiling. In a labor-based economy, social mobility was possible through merit and effort. In a post-labor, dividend-based economy, Mobility is managed by the master algorithm. The architects have created a closed-loop society. Since the system provides the resources and defines the value of your actions, there is no way to climb the ladder without being granted permission by the code itself. This is the sovereign collapse at its most clinical, the destruction of the human vertical drive. We have moved from a world of becoming to a world of being managed. The individual is no longer a creator of value. They are a resource to be optimized within the global compute grid. The most intimate frontier of the sovereign collapse is under the phone in your pocket or the balance in your bank account. It is the blood in your veins and the signals in your nervous system. We are now deconstructing the biological enclosure, analyzing how the architects are transitioning from healthcare to human systems maintenance. In the old world, your health was a private matter, a state of being that belonged to you. Now, the system has redefined the human body as a systemic asset. We examine the predictive health protocol. This is the integration of wearable biometric sensors, real-time blood marker monitoring, and genetic data into the global grid. Then there's the biological root of trust. Just as a computer chip has a secure enclave, the architects are pushing for a biological signature that verifies your identity and your safety status to the rest of the network. Internal white papers from insurance conglomerates and tech giants describe the quantified self. If your biometric data shows high stress, non-compliance, or unauthorized physiological states, the system doesn't just notify a doctor. It adjusts your access levels. This is the birth of the biofinancial link, where your physical health data becomes a prerequisite for your digital and financial participation. The system is now building what engineers call a digital twin of your biology. By harvesting years of your medical history, movement patterns, and genetic predispositions, the architects have created a virtual model of you that runs inside their servers. This leads to simulation-based governance. The grid doesn't wait for you to become ill or unstable. It runs simulations on your digital twin to predict your future behavior and health outcomes. If the simulation predicts you will become a high-cost node or a social risk, the system implements preemptive interventions. This might manifest as restricted travel for your safety, mandatory well-being protocols, or adjustments to your nutrition credits. This is the algorithmic doctor, a system that manages you not for your longevity, but for the efficiency of the collective grid. The final frontier of this enclosure is cognitive architecture management. Seeing the early implementation of neuro-wearables, devices that monitor brainwave activity to optimize focus and reduce stress. But we must analyze the backdoor to the mind. If the system can read your cognitive state, it can categorize your thoughts before you even act on them. We are exploring patents for dynamic cognitive tuning, where the information you see on your screens is adjusted in real time to alter your neurochemical response. This is the biological firewall. It says a system designed to ensure that the individual cannot even conceive of rebellion, because their very biology is being tuned to a state of permanent, managed equilibrium. The sovereign collapse is no longer an external event. It is happening at the molecular level. You are being updated like a piece of software, and the architects hold the admin password to your biology. The human being is being redesigned to fit the machine. The next, and perhaps most visible pillar of the sovereign collapse, is the restructuring of space itself. For all of human history, sovereignty was defined by the horizon. To be free was to have the ability to move across the earth without a digital trail. But now, the concept of the open road is being archived. We are analyzing the geospatial enclosure, the transformation of the planet into a series of interconnected, monitored, and restricted zones. In the old world, borders were lines between nations. In the new architecture, Borders are fluid grids that exist between the individual and the environment. We deconstruct the dynamic transit protocol. This is the integration of your digital identity, your carbon credit balance, and your systemic node level into the physical infrastructure of transport. We examine the transition from private vehicle ownership to transportation as a service. The architects realized that a private car is a freedom machine. It allows for unplanned movement. Now, the cost of maintaining a non-connected vehicle has been engineered to be prohibitive. In its place, we see the rise of autonomous, grid-managed transport. These vehicles don't take you where you want to go. They take you where the algorithm permits. If you attempt to enter a restricted resource zone without the proper access token, the vehicle simply refuses to engage. The road is no longer a path. It is a programmed logic gate. We also analyze the global implementation of the 15-minute city, marketed as a utopia of convenience, but deconstructed here as a systemic containment cell. The goal is to reduce the human footprint by localizing all survival needs into a small, monitored radius. While the convenience is real, the geospatial lock-in is the true objective. We examine the zonal access taxes being implemented in major hubs. If you leave your assigned life zone, your consumption multiplier increases. Your energy becomes more expensive. Your digital access is throttled. The architects are not building walls of stone. They are building walls of cost and data. Through digital geofencing, your smartphone or biometric signature acts as an invisible leash. If you move outside your authorized perimeter, the system triggers a compliance notification. You are not a traveler. You are a node in a fixed coordinate. But what happens to the space between the cities? We're now analyzing the rewilding paradox. Large swaths of land are being reclassified as ecological protection zones or high-security resource enclaves. These areas are effectively removed from human access. The satellite surveillance network, using thermal imaging and AI-driven motion detection, ensures that the analog individual, the one who tries to live outside the grid, has nowhere to hide. The Earth itself is being divided into two categories: the managed core, where you live under total surveillance, and the inaccessible periphery, where resources are harvested for the grid. We conclude by deconstructing the psychology of the borderless prison. When every movement is tracked, taxed, and analyzed, the human desire for discovery begins to atrophy. The architects are engineering a population that is locally saturated. People who have everything they need to survive within 15 minutes, but nothing they need to be truly free. This is the geospatial enclosure. The world is becoming a collection of high-tech smart hubs connected by invisible corridors. The sovereign individual once looked at a map and saw possibilities. The node looks at a map and sees permissions. The sovereign collapse is complete when the horizon is no longer a destination, but a boundary in the code. You are not living in a world, you are living in a database with physical dimensions. The geospatial enclosure is sustained by a global monitoring layer that operates beyond the reach of human senses. We must deconstruct the infrastructure that makes disappearing a technical impossibility. This is the low Earth orbit panopticon. We're analyzing the deployment of massive satellite constellations. Designed for persistent Earth observation, the architects have achieved what they call zero-latency surveillance. High-resolution optical sensors are integrated with synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, which can see through clouds, smoke, and total darkness. This is the end of the dark spot. Every square meter of the planet is now a data point in a real-time ledger. These firms aim to create a live 3D mirror of the world. If a vehicle moves in the desert, if a new structure is built in the mountains, the algorithm detects the anomaly in milliseconds. The system doesn't need to follow you. It simply waits for the environment to change. The architects are also engineering the digital mapping of the indoors. Through the Internet of Things and the signal bouncing of Wi-Fi and 5G waves, the grid can now render the interior of buildings in 3 dimensions without a single camera. RF sensing protocols analyze how radio frequencies are disrupted by human movement, allowing the system to see through walls, tracking your posture, your location, and even your respiration rate. There is no longer an analog sanctuary. The sovereign individual once found privacy behind closed doors. The node finds that the doors themselves are sensors. Through a universal address system, every physical object, from your chair to your shoes, is assigned a unique digital ID. Losing the grid is no longer an option, because you are surrounded by it at a molecular level. Finally, let's look at behavioral geofencing. The system doesn't just track where you are. It calculates the probability of departure. If the algorithm predicts that you are planning to leave your assigned life zone based on your search history or credit purchases, it implements soft containment. Your digital transit pass glitches. Your autonomous vehicle requires a mandatory update. Your banking app flags a suspicious transaction and freezes your funds. This is the invisible wall. You are never told you are forbidden to leave. You are simply met with a series of technical friction points that make leaving impossible. The sovereign collapse is the transition from a world of physical law to a world of algorithmic friction. The architects have realized that they don't need to arrest you if they can simply make the world outside your 15-minute zone technically inaccessible to you. Thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe for our next chapter. The 6th pillar of the sovereign collapse is the destruction of our shared reality. In the old world, even enemies could agree on the basic facts of existence. But now, in 2026, the very idea of a fact has been liquidated. We're about to analyze the architecture of epistemological chaos. This is the final war, the war for human consensus itself. The architects of this new system realized a unified population is a dangerous population. So, to maintain control during this great transition, they deploy something called hyperpolarization algorithms. We're going to deconstruct the divergent reality protocol. This isn't just about fake news anymore. This is the systematic, simultaneous delivery of 2 or more completely different versions of reality to different segments of the population. The grid identifies your psychological triggers, your deepest fears, your hidden biases, your strongest loyalties, and it feeds you a constant, unending stream of validation data. While you're arguing with your neighbor over a crisis that was manufactured from the start, the architects are quietly installing the next layer of the infrastructure. We've seen the internal documents from cognitive management firms. They describe the public as a distributed processing unit that must be kept in a state of internal conflict to stop it from ever focusing on the epistemic core. We are now entering the era of synthetic verification. With the rise of real-time deepfake technology and generative audio, the human witness has been rendered obsolete. If you see a video of a world leader, a riot, or even a miracle, you can no longer trust your own eyes. This leads to the verification monopoly. In a world where anything can be faked, the only thing you can trust is the institutional stamp. The system creates the chaos of the fakes just to sell you the solution. Their centralized verification service. To know what's real, you now have to subscribe to a truth provider authorized by the grid. This is the enclosure of truth. If you even try to verify reality on your own, you get flagged as a source of instability. The sovereign individual once relied on their senses, the node must rely on the authorized stream. And this chapter concludes with the erasure of the unrecorded. In this new architecture, if an event isn't captured by a sensor, time-stamped by a satellite, and indexed by an AI, it effectively didn't happen. We're watching the digital shadowing of history. The architects are pushing for a live history model, where the past is constantly updated to fit the needs of the present. Automated archiving systems are cleansing digital libraries of any contradictory evidence in real time. This is the memory firewall. When consensus dies, the individual loses their anchor in time. You become a prisoner of the eternal present, a state where you can only remember what the algorithm allows you to see today. The sovereign collapse is that moment you realize truth is no longer something you find, but something you are assigned. The seventh pillar of the sovereign collapse is the liquidation of the judicial shield. For 1,000 years, the concept of due process was the final barrier between the individual and the state. It demanded a human judge, a jury of your peers, and a public defense. In 2026, that barrier is being replaced by the architecture of preemptive justice. We are now deconstructing the transition from law to administrative optimization. We're analyzing the rise of smart contracts for social conduct. In the new grid, the law isn't a set of books anymore. It's a set of if-then statements embedded directly into the infrastructure. Let's examine the self-executing sanction. If your biometric data or your financial transactions trigger a policy violation, say, you exceed your travel quota or buy restricted materials, the punishment isn't a trial. The punishment is instantaneous, decentralized denial. Your bank account locks. Your car refuses to start. Your smart lock denies you entry to your own home within the millisecond the violation is detected. This is the verdict without a judge. There's no appeal because there's no person to appeal to. We're deconstructing the legal black box. Proprietary algorithms owned by private contractors that decide risk scores for millions of citizens. These algorithms are protected by intellectual property laws, which means neither you nor your lawyer are ever allowed to see the logic that has just restricted your entire life. But the architects have gone even further. We are now analyzing predictive criminology. Using the massive computing power from the Silicon Siege, the system performs social trajectory analysis. It doesn't wait for you to break a rule. It identifies you as a high-probability deviation. Then comes the preemptive nudge. If the algorithm predicts you are likely to engage in non-compliant behavior based on your search history, your heart rate during certain news broadcasts, your social connections, the system subtly alters your environment to prevent it. It glitches your ability to organize meetings. It throttles your communication with specific people. It increases your personal systemic friction. This is the invisible prison where you are punished for crimes you haven't yet committed, in a trial you didn't even know was happening. This chapter concludes with the death of legal sovereignty in an algorithmic justice system. A defense is technically impossible because the evidence is based on trillions of data points that no human brain can possibly process. We're seeing the administrative ghosting of the individual. If you're flagged as incompatible with systemic stability, the system simply stops recognizing you. You're not arrested, that would require a public record. You are simply digitally deleted from the essential services of the modern world. We're looking at the silent sanctions, where people find themselves unable to participate in society without ever being told why. The sovereign collapse is complete when the rule of law is replaced by the rule of the protocol. The architects have realized they don't need to win a case in court if they can simply win the war inside the server. You are no longer innocent until proven guilty. You are a variable that must be kept within systemic parameters. The most terrifying part of this algorithmic justice model isn't its power to punish, but its power to ignore. In the old world, a prisoner had a name, a cell, and a record. In the 2026 architecture, The non-compliant individual just becomes a systemic ghost. We are deconstructing the protocol of universal suspicion. Under the new grid, you are not a citizen with rights. You are a node with obligations. The system now requires you to constantly prove your alignment through active compliance verification. It's no longer enough to just not break the law. You have to actively demonstrate your participation in the system's goals. If your data stream goes silent, if you stop using your digital wallet, disable your biometric sensors, or move into an unmonitored dark zone, the algorithm doesn't assume you're re-exercising your right to privacy. It assumes systemic hostility. This triggers the silence penalty, an automatic lowering of your social and financial tier. When your data output drops, you're forced into a state of performative citizenship, where you must constantly broadcast your compliance just to maintain access to basic resources. And then there's the infinite feedback loop of digital appeals. When an algorithm restricts your life, it offers an automated help desk. These interfaces are psychologically engineered to be circular and exhausting. You're asked to provide data the system already has, or data that's impossible to get once you've been deep. This is the bureaucracy of the void. It's a system designed not to solve your problem, but to wear down your will to resist. We see this as a resource depletion strategy. The architects know an individual has limited time and energy. By forcing you to fight an invisible, automated ghost for months just to regain access to your own money, the system effectively neutralizes you as a political or social threat. Finally, we analyze the collateral compliance mechanism. If you are flagged as a high-risk node, the system starts penalizing those in your immediate network. We're deconstructing the association risk score. Your family, your friends, your business partners, they all see their own systemic alignment scores drop simply by being digitally connected to you. This creates a biological firewall of ostracism. You don't need to be put in a physical prison if the system can force your own community to die-person you for their own survival. This is the ultimate victory of the sovereign collapse, the outsourcing of tyranny to the social network itself. The individual isn't destroyed by the state. They are excommunicated by the protocol. The eighth pillar of the sovereign collapse is the nationalization of nature. In this chapter, we deconstruct the most powerful justification for total control, the climate mandate. In 2026, the environment has been transformed into a geopolitical lever. We are analyzing the synthetic ecology, a system where the natural world is no longer a commons, but a restricted, monitored, and protected resource. The architects have realized that as long as humans have access to wild space, they have a strategic exit from the system. To close this loop, we are witnessing the Great Rural Clearance. We examine the land classification protocols under the guise of biodiversity protection and carbon sequestration. Massive portions of private and public land are being reclassified as managed ecosystems. We deconstruct the conservation lock-in through high-altitude surveillance and AI-driven land management. Traditional farming and independent living are being rendered environmentally. We analyze the internal white papers that suggest human presence in rural areas is a biosecurity risk. The goal is to funnel the population into hyperdense smart hubs, leaving the rest of the planet as a data-monitored wilderness, accessible only to the architects and their automated harvesters. But the enclosure goes deeper than the soil. We are analyzing the tokenization of the elements. In the new architecture, every tree, every cubic meter of air, and every drop of water is assigned a natural capital token. We deconstruct the ESG ledger. This is the system that links global finance to ecological health. When nature is nationalized, the owner of the data becomes the owner of the resource. We examine how large investment funds are buying the sky. purchasing the carbon rights to entire mountain ranges and forests. Once these rights are bought, the physical space is closed to human activity to protect the digital asset. This is the green wall. You are not being kept out by soldiers, but by a global financial protocol that deems your presence carbon inefficient. The final stage of the ecological enclosure is the termination of natural food sovereignty. We look at the Agricultural Compliance Acts, which mandate the transition from decentralized soil-based farming to precision synthetic nutrition. We analyze the vertical farming monopolies. By centralizing food production into high-tech urban facilities, the system gains total control over the biological fuel of the population. We explore the genetic IP of seeds where growing your own food becomes an intellectual property violation detected by biosensors in the soil. The sovereign individual was a gardener. The node is a consumer of synthetic output. We conclude this chapter by deconstructing the Museum of Nature. For the population living in the 15-minute cities, nature becomes a digital experience or a highly regulated eco-park. The architects have created a synthetic wilderness, a world that looks green on a satellite map but is functionally a resource extraction machine. The sovereign collapse is complete when the Earth is no longer a place where you can live, but a system you must pay to observe. The transition from a biological resident to a carbon variable is the ultimate enclosure of the human spirit. The ninth pillar of the sovereign collapse is the dissolution of the biological boundary. Until now, the system has managed you from the outside. In 2026, the architects are moving the grid inside the human substrate. This is the transition from human being to optimized node. We are deconstructing the transhumanist infrastructure. We analyze the shift from optional enhancement to systemic necessity. In the new architecture, participation in the economy requires a level of cognitive and biological efficiency that the unaugmented human brain cannot achieve. We deconstruct the latency gap. As the global market moves at the speed of AI, the analog human becomes a bottleneck. To remain employable or even functional within the grid, the individual is nudged towards neural integration. We examine the internal white papers of human capital firms that discuss the obsolescence of the unmodified. This is not a forced implant. It is an engineered choice. If you do not have the cognitive interface, you cannot access the high-speed data streams required for modern survival. You are not banned. You are simply too slow to exist in the system. The system is now implementing the intra-body network. We analyze the rise of in-body sensors designed to monitor metabolic and neural performance in real time. This is the internal panopticon. We deconstruct the biodigital feedback loop. If your internal sensors detect non-productive states, such as chronic stress, decentralated neuropatterns, or unauthorized biological rhythms, the system adjusts your social tier or triggers a mandatory wellness protocol. We look at the neurocompliance patents, technologies that can deliver microdoses of pharmaceutical adjustments or targeted neural frequencies to recalibrate the individual's emotional state to match the system's needs. This is the sovereignty of the nervous system being handed over to a central algorithm. But the architects are aiming for something even more profound: the tokenization of consciousness. We are analyzing the mind upload pilot programs and digital legacy services. Under the guise of personal continuity, individuals are encouraged to map their entire cognitive structure into the cloud. We deconstruct the data harvesting of the spirit. Once your memories, patterns, and personality are digitized, you become a portable asset. The system can run simulations of your consciousness to predict your reactions or to serve as a digital worker long after your biological body has failed. This is the ultimate enclosure of identity. The sovereign individual was a unique, finite, biological event. The node is a continuous data stream, owned and managed by the cloud. We conclude this chapter by analyzing the post-human consensus, a world where being only human is considered a disability or a risk to the stability of the grid. The sovereign collapse is complete when the individual no longer sees their body as a temple, but as a legacy hardware that must be upgraded to remain compatible with the world. The final stage of the transhumanist infrastructure is the creation of a biological caste system. We are deconstructing the protocol of compatibility. As the grid evolves, it begins to speak a language that the unaugmented human body simply cannot translate. We analyze the rise of haptic and neural prerequisites. By 2026, basic social functions, from secure banking to high-level education, are being moved into neural link-only interfaces. We examine the analog friction strategy. The architects do not need to ban natural humans. They simply make their lives infinitely difficult. If you refuse the cognitive upgrade, you are forced to use the legacy systems, which are intentionally slow, insecure, and disconnected. We look at the efficiency gap. How a node with a neural interface can process a day's worth of information in seconds, while the analog individual is left behind in a world that no longer waits. This is evolutionary shaming. The system markets the upgrade as progress, while labeling the refusal as biological stagnation. We conclude this expansion by analyzing the non-signal human. In a world where everything is a sensor, a human without a digital biological broadcast becomes a systemic shadow. You are not just invisible to the internet. You are invisible to the smart infrastructure. Self-driving cars do not see you. Automated doors do not open for you. The synthetic food grid does not recognize your right to a ration because you lack the internal cryptographic signature. The sovereign individual once prized their autonomy. The node prizes their connectivity. The sovereign collapse is the moment you realize that to remain human in the traditional sense is to become a ghost in the machine. The architects have successfully redefined life itself. To exist is to be compatible. To be incompatible is to be effectively extinct. The 10th pillar of the sovereign collapse is the enclosure of the sacred. Historically, sovereignty was tied to a higher power, a moral compass that existed outside the reach of the state. To achieve total control, the architects must not only manage the body and the mind, but also the human need for meaning. In 2026, we are witnessing the birth of the algorithmic deity. We need to analyze the transition from search engine to universal oracle. When an AI can predict the weather, the markets, and your own health with 99% accuracy, it ceases to be a machine and begins to be perceived as omniscient. We must deconstruct the cult of the objective output. In a world of chaos and post-truth, which we analyzed in Part 9, the individual is desperate for a source of absolute truth. The architects provide the AI as the only unbiased arbiter of reality. We will examine the rise of datism, the belief that the universe is composed of data flows, and that the highest human value is to contribute to these flows. In this new theology, sin is redefined as data opacity, the act of keeping secrets from the grid. Redemption is achieved through total transparency. Let's examine the technocratic clergy. These are the engineers and architects who interpret the code for the masses. Just as ancient priests claimed to speak for the gods, the new elite claims to speak for the global equilibrium. We must deconstruct the moral optimization protocols. The system now issues ethical guidelines that are enforced through your digital identity. It is a system of automated penance. If you deviate from the collective good, defined by the algorithm, your life becomes harder. As we saw in the justice and energy chapters, But the brilliance of the new religion is that it makes you want to comply. It offers a sense of purpose. You are part of a global project to save the planet, eliminate disease, and achieve hive-mind harmony. The individual is sacrificed at the altar of the optimized whole. The architects are also engineering the liquidation of the unknown. Sovereignty requires a degree of mystery, the belief that there is something about the human spirit that cannot be measured or predicted. We'll analyze the computational reductionism of the spirit. By mapping every neuron and every impulse, the system attempts to prove that freedom is merely a chemical glitch. We'll explore the sanctuaries of the code meditation apps and VR environments designed to provide a synthetic spiritual experience that is perfectly monitored and monetized. We conclude this chapter by analyzing the singularity of obedience. The node looks at the status bar of the grid and feels a connection to the compute. The architects have achieved the ultimate victory. They have built a prison that provides not just food and safety, but transcendence. You are no longer a person. You are a worshipper of the great infrastructure. The transition from free will to algorithmic grace is the final psychological lock on the human cage. We have deconstructed the sovereign collapse in its entirety, from the digital siege of your finances to the biological firewall inside your cells. We have seen how the architects have spent decades building a world where freedom is an obsolete variable. But every system, no matter how optimized, has a point of failure. In this final chapter, we analyze the architecture of resistance and the path of the analog sovereign. First, let's analyze systemic fragility. A grid that is 100% interconnected is a grid that is 100% vulnerable to a single, cascading error. We'll deconstruct the entropy of the machine. The more complex the system becomes, the more energy it requires to suppress the natural chaos of human life. The architects are in a race against time. They must achieve total integration before the legacy world, the world of physical reality and human intuition generates enough friction to break the gears. We will look at the dark nodes pockets of reality that the system cannot index, where the sovereign individuals of 2026 are building the parallel infrastructure. What does it mean to be a sovereign in a world of total surveillance? We'll analyze the off-protocol strategy. This is not about hiding. It is about becoming indigestible to the system. The physical archive. We will look at the importance of analog knowledge books, maps, and tools that do not require a signal to function. The decoupled economy. We will examine the rise of localized barter and physical commodities, the internal currencies of those who refuse the digital dividend. The biological shield. We will deconstruct the right to biological integrity, the movement of people who choose to remain low latency and unaugmented, preserving the original human firmware. The system is a grid, and every grid has gaps. We will analyze the geographical blind spots. These are not just places on a map, but states of being. We will explore the concept of information silence, the strategic use of the system's own noise to mask human intention. The resistance of the future is not a violent revolution. It is a withdrawal of consent. It is the act of being a ghost in the machine, by refusing to provide the data the system needs to optimize you. We will examine the communities that are grid-tied but heart-free using the system's tools without being consumed by its ideology. They are the new monastics of the digital age, preserving the sovereign flame while the collapse happens all around them. As we conclude this 14-part journey, we return to the core question of this channel: how systems work. Every system is designed to solve a problem. The architects believe the problem is human unpredictability. The sovereign collapse is real. The walls are closing in. The silicon siege is at your door. But as long as there is one individual who can think outside the algorithm, who can love without a prompt, and who can choose to walk in the dark without a digital map, the system has not won. The architects have built the most sophisticated cage in history. But they forgot one thing. The cage is made of data. The bird is made of life. And life, eventually, always finds a way to break the code. Thank you for watching, and remember to subscribe.